Think about it. For those who aren't born into wealth, your salary forms the base capital for your investments. So the higher that figure is, the better. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received about money was from my very experienced personal banker at the age of 15. I was just about to open my first bank account. He said, whatever you do, as long as it's within your power, avoid credit cards and unnecessary debts. 2 decades on, not only have I imbibed the no credit card and no unnecessary debt policy into my financial practices, I've also learned some important and core money habits that have really helped me on my financial journey. And regardless of where you are in your financial journey, in this video, I will be sharing 6 tips that can help you reset your financial future and set you up for success. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Jumoke and I am an investment banker based in London. The first step is to understand the 1, 2, 3, i.e. the basics of money. You've probably heard that in the past and it may not be the most exciting step, but it's essentially a start. Now, money is a tool, and like every other tool, it is typically recommended that you read the manuals, or these days watch a YouTube video, in order to understand that tool and use it to the best of its abilities or maximize its capabilities. Say Tesla came out with some amazing new gadget that nobody has ever heard about. If you were to buy that gadget, you most likely would want to understand how exactly it works and the best way to utilize it. It's the same principle with money. I personally started becoming a lot better and more intentional with money in my 20s. Now, some people are highly literate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are the most educated when it comes to money. I find it interesting that over the generations, it has been imprinted in our minds to go to school to essentially gain the skill set we need to go into the workplace and then become employees for someone else. But we aren't taught about the essential core skills and the basics around personal finance. And when you get to higher education in college or university, you literally have to opt into subjects like economics or finance or accounting to understand money. I personally believe that from an age where children can understand and comprehend logic, they really should be taught about the basics of money. For my undergraduate and my postgraduate studies, I studied the science of how the economy works. I studied economics and finance. And with all that theoretical education, I still wasn't good with money. It took me going into the workplace to understand the reality of how money actually works. And because we aren't given that formal education unless we opt into it, it's important that we gift ourselves the knowledge. Number 2, protect yourself from the future and build an emergency fund. Now, there's a quote I love by Seneca, but life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. But this is the one time I will say it makes sense to worry about the future. Build an emergency fund before anything else by putting money away on a monthly basis into a high-yielding savings account. Let me explain why. When you invest in stocks, shares, bonds, or real estate, that capital becomes partly illiquid. And depending on what you have invested in, your liquidity level drops. Let's say you bought a share of Apple or IBM right this second, and then you decided to sell it within a minute or 2. It usually takes a few days for that trade to settle, i.e. for the back end of that transaction to be mechanized and for the shares to show up in your account. So even if you decided to buy and sell shares within 1 day, you still have to wait a couple of days to see the funds back into your account. And this is called the settlement period. And sometimes when you net out the cost of doing the transaction, you might find that you've actually gotten back less than you've invested. So because you have to wait a few days for your trade to settle, it means you don't have immediate access to that capital. Now take real estate on the other hand, for example. That's even a longer period of lockup, of illiquidity, because for you to buy or sell a property, it typically takes a few weeks or a few months. So once your funds leave your current account or your checking accounts to go into an investment account, it loses some of its liquidity. And this is why building an emergency fund is essential. Now, the size of the emergency fund will be a personal decision. You need to figure out what your expenses are, what your lifestyle is like, and what in your life could potentially be an emergency. We can't always, of course, predict the future, but at least have some semblance of an idea as to what that could be and how much exactly you need to put away to take care of that issue when it arises. The third thing is to figure out what makes you happy. If money and time wasn't an issue right now, what would you do? For some people, that would be traveling the world. For others, it might be sleeping all day and watching Netflix all night. For others, it might be teaching, it might be coaching, it might be creative freedom and expressions. And for others, it is making money. I genuinely believe that money money can buy you a certain level of happiness. Let me explain. If what makes you happy is experiential moments, traveling the world, or having physical possessions that increase your level of happiness, then you do need money to fund those activities. But I also agree that money cannot buy you sustained and lasting happiness. There's some people who have all the money in the world, but they're still unhappy. And now going back to my initial question, what would make you happy? If you need money to accomplish those things, then money should ideally be a priority to you. But the one caveat I will add is do not wait to be happy. As you build the capital and money that you require to undertake those activities that will fundamentally lead to your happiness, remember to also enjoy your life and live for today. Because sadly, for most people, the reality is that at a later stage in life, you may not be physically able to enjoy the things that you can enjoy right now. So don't wait until you have that target amount in your account to start being happy. Number 4, hack your boss and get a raise. My guess is that if you're watching this video, you probably are in a 9-to-5 job where you are selling your skill set to an employer, the skill set you spent years and years crafting by going to school and educating yourself. You're then selling that to an employer who's taking that skill set and making multiple times over what they paid for it. Unfortunately, a lot of times in the workplace, and I have to say this is especially true for women, we tend to underestimate our values. And so when we ask for a raise, we tend to shortchange ourselves by not asking for the appropriate amount of money. That could be because we are not aware of what our market values are, or perhaps it's just been instilled in us that talking about money or asking for a raise is some massive big taboo. When you're going into a negotiation about your pay or an increase in your salary, you need to know your market value by doing some research, speaking to headhunters, understanding the ballpark within which someone in your position with your skill set would be paid. Another way to do that is to calculate how much money your company has made and what your personal percentage contribution has been to that. Typically, this is easier to do if you are in a sales position where you can actually track your contribution perhaps within a team, and you need to know the best time to ask for a raise. That's typically during your annual performance review, or perhaps when your company has just released their financial figures, their annual financial figures. If they've done well, most likely your bosses are in a good mood, and that is the time to present your case. Think about it. For those who aren't born into wealth, your salary forms the base capital for your investments. So the higher that figure is, the better. Number 5, pay for the right expertise. Most of the purchases we will make in our lives come with some level of advice, whether that's buying a new automobile or buying a new house, tax advisors, accountants, financial coaches. All of these professionals are essential when it comes to making good money decisions. And it's definitely worth paying for expertise from someone who is knowledgeable and has experience in order to guide you best, even though they may not be the cheapest options. Now, here is a cautionary tale from one of my clients. A client of mine who is heavily invested in real estate unfortunately hired a legal practitioner who wasn't well versed or well experienced in a certain area within one of his chain transactions. That mistake could have cost him £150,000 if he wasn't able to claim on their professional insurance. Every now and then I hear him say, I've learned from this experience and I won't be making that mistake in the future. I will pay for expertise. And unfortunately, it is true. You get what you pay for. So if you're paying someone to perhaps coach you on your financial journey, it's really essential you hire the right person with skill, knowledge, and experience. Forget the past and know that it's never too late to get started. A lot of us have made some really bad decisions and mistakes when it comes to money. And this journey of financial freedom is partly psychological. Your mental anchor often dictates your decision-making processes as well as your actions. If you keep regret alive about your past, thinking about what you may have done or may have been if you had followed different paths in life, well, firstly, you'll never know because probabilities aren't always realities. And secondly, we all have the opportunity to reset right now and do things differently moving forward. Yes, it's very important to learn from your mistakes, but dwelling on your past sorrows won't change them. It will only eliminate today's joys and tomorrow's possibilities. So although it's not easy, we need to practice letting go of the past so we can have tunnel vision for what's in front of us. Number 7 is to become best friends with a Roth IRA account if you're in the US or an ISA account if you're in the UK. I'm not a tax advisor, but I trained as an investment banker. And during my CFA exams, it became abundantly clear, if it wasn't before, just how important taxes are and how much they eat into your wealth and your finances. If you can max out your Roth IRA or your ISA account, which are essentially tax efficient investment accounts, you're not only saving money from avoiding taxes, you're compounding your growth. Each year you get a certain amount that you can invest in your Roth IRA or your ISA account. And in the UK, this amount is currently £20,000 a year. In the US, that amount is $6,500 annually. And once you are invested, any future withdrawals from your account are not taxed, regardless of how much your investment has grown. Not only are you gaining access to the financial markets through these accounts, you also get to avoid those pesky taxes that could be higher in the future. If you have never taken your personal finances seriously and perhaps you live paycheck to paycheck, it's never too late to get started. Sometimes we bury our heads in the sand because we're too frightened to really face reality. But once we start to confront our fears one step at a time, those fears start to retreat. And before you know it, these money habits become second nature. Bye for now.